Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks for joining me on this video today. I'm going to be going over a debt journey that I had over the last 5 years, pretty much post university all the way up until just recently. Given our current situation in the world with everybody sort of being at home, saving their money, countries going into recessions, and just a whole bunch of businesses going out, I thought now would be the perfect time to bring up something financial. I hope that these tips that I give you in this video will be able to get you out of the situation that you're in and that I was in. And if you are currently going through debt during this period, hopefully it can give you some peace of mind. Before I get to the tips, I just want to say that I'm not a financial advisor. So anything I tell you is just personal experience and you can take it with a grain of salt. It's completely up to you. So if I haven't lost you yet, let's get started. The first thing I want to highlight getting rid of your debt is prioritizing it. Make sure you really prioritize it. And I mean, don't get sidetracked and don't start purchasing the most random, outlandish things that you literally cannot afford, therefore allowing yourself to get into more debt. One thing that I found that really helped me through my journey was always having it at the forefront of my mind. I'm not saying stress or worry about the debt that you have in front of you. And given it can get quite stressful, so I don't blame you if you feel that way. By keeping it prioritized, you're allowing yourself to constantly work around your means and around your budget, allowing it to be the first thing that you put your finances towards before any sort of splurge and fulfillment. Something that someone told me a long time ago was that if you're in debt, you can't have savings. Now, I tried a lot to have savings at the same time as having debt, and that's what I mean by prioritizing it. I really didn't. So I was trying to basically balance two things at the same time, which basically don't coexist. And that's when I learned the lesson of definitely making it the first priority. Now, given my circumstance, I was in debt for about 5 years when it came to this sort of consumer debt that I had. But hey, you learn. Number two, the second thing I learned was being able to compromise. And this sort of ties in with being able to prioritize, because when you prioritize your debt, then you're forced to compromise other things that you would normally put your finances towards. An example of this is that throughout my whole university journey, onwards and after, even until now, I was foregoing a lot of luxuries when it came to eating food. I became super simple and I compromised a lot of my health. And I'm not saying do that. Definitely don't compromise your health. But for me, what worked was being able to eat simple things and keep myself very, very frugal. The debt was so detrimental to me, so it stopped me from hanging out with friends, stopped me from having a good time. And what I was forced to do was to compromise all of that. I had to put all of that aside and I had to focus on the finances. So many things got compromised in order for me to just make my debt repayments. Things like events that I was supposed to go to, hanging out with friends, my relationship, gifts that I wanted to give family members during special events like Christmas or birthdays. Slowly but surely I worked my way up, but I definitely did splurge a little bit on travel. So I felt like I didn't really compromise travel, and that was more so to do with my mental health. I didn't want to compromise my mental health, so I forced myself to constantly have some money, even if I had to go into more debt just to travel. Definitely not a habit I recommend doing just because it did prolong my debt, but it kept me sane throughout that journey. Number three for me would be two things such as endurance and patience. Learn that this journey will come to an end eventually. The debt may look like it's going to be there forever and that you're never going to get rid of it. And I definitely felt that at times. It actually made me super depressed. It made me really antisocial. It made me avoid a lot of fun times and situations. I felt like I was running around in circles. I was always questioning myself. I was always doubting myself. I was asking questions like, when is it going to be paid? Will this ever end? Why have I put this curse upon myself? But at the end of the day, when you really break down the numbers and you really sit there and plan or strategize about what you're going to do with your debt and how you do that, then eventually you start to see that they're just numbers. If you start to reduce those numbers and you start to bring that number down, it starts to become a little bit more motivating. You start to feel like you have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more fulfillment in this journey. And I think that's a key point. A little extra point here is to make it a journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you're going to be in it for a while depending on how much debt or what kind of debt you're in. So be patient with yourself. There are going to be days where you're not going to be feeling up to it. There are going to be days where you're going to be doubting the situation that you're in. There are going to be days where you're going to feel so negative and feel so deprived of just simple joys such as going out and getting a coffee. Mind you, the debt that I was in was pretty detrimental compared to the income that I was earning. So maybe for you it might not be coffee, but definitely for me that was a big one. The fourth thing that I want to mention in this video is interest. Oh my God. This point will actually tie into my fifth point, but for now, let's just talk about interest. Interest for me was the worst thing ever. I feel like whenever you get through paying off your monthly payment or weekly payment or however your plan is for your debt, it always just felt like you would take one step forward and 5 steps back. And it felt like that it would just never, ever, ever end. Like I mentioned before, you would look at the numbers and then you would look at them again after the whole payment has been processed and that plan period has gone through, and you'll realize that you technically didn't really pay much at all because of the interest. Mind you, some people are smart and only get smaller debts. I actually had quite a big debt. I had about 15 to 20K in total over the 5 years, and I know for some people that's not a lot, but I'm working a part-time wage as well as being a part-time actor, so for me that was just like having the interest on top of that just didn't make things easy. Every time I would look at the sort of brief and summary of everything that I've done with my debt, I'm talking weekly payments, extra payments, monthly payments, everything that I looked at, you would actually look at your debt starting point, then you would look at how much you've actually paid within that period, and you'd find that you've actually overpaid already so much within that time than what you were supposed to. And I guess that's what interest is. But one tip that I can definitely tell you is to try and pay more than what you normally pay. Don't just pay the bare minimum. I mean, granted, if that's all you can pay, then go for it. But if you feel like you can drop a little bit of extra cash, or if you can pick up a second job, or if you can do another side hustle, just so that you have a little bit of extra income, I feel like that's definitely the best plan for it. Avoid all of the high interest rate sort of loans, and no matter how juicy they look, they're terrible. Debt is really just a short-term solution for a long-term problem. And that goes to my last point, which is techniques. I did my research and I learned so many different techniques that I pretty much avoided the first 3 years of my 5-year debt journey. 2 of those years, I hustled so hard to try and find all the techniques that would work for me. Books like this, where they're completely blank, see, completely blank, they're not blank anymore. I filled these books up with so many notes, so many little things that I could just jot down, techniques that I learned, strategies. I would look at Excel spreadsheets. I would learn how to use Excel. I would learn how to read certain books on finance, even if I didn't understand it. One of the techniques that I found was called the snowball effect, which is where you would basically pay the lowest debt, get that out of the way as quickly as possible, and you would sort of work your way up into paying off the bigger debts. Another technique that I learned was avalanche, where you would pay the highest interest loan or the highest amount, depending on how you want to go, whether it's by interest or by amount, and then you would basically avalanche that down, and you would slowly just constantly chop down all the debts that you had. Some books that I can recommend are Rich Dad Poor Dad and The Barefoot Investor, especially if you're Australian. That's really more catered to the Australian market, which goes on about how you can put savings away, which is more, I think, for post-debt knowledge, but it's definitely handy to have that knowledge available whenever you need it. And I even had to turn to people who I knew had their financial shit together. So I would ask people who knew about shares, about trading, you know, what they did with their money, what type of accounts they had, how they invested their money. None of this is in any particular order. This is just stuff I learned over the years going through this situation. If you're interested in the journey of my debt and how I even got to that point, and how I got out of it, I can definitely leave that link after this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the content that you see. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.